Hey everyone, Miceman391 here, and I got a new video for you today, and it is a killer concept for Dead by Daylight that has been stewing around in the back of my head for a while now. Had to get it out there. It is for The Thing, the John Carpenter 1982 version. If you haven't seen The Thing, then this video is not going to make a lot of sense to you. I'd recommend you go check it out. It's probably my favorite horror movie of all time. And that's why I'm making a killer concept today for The Thing, because I think it's super cool, and I think it would fit really well into Dead by Daylight. So let's get into it. Alright, so, The Thing. What would the focus of The Thing be on? It would be on stealth and paranoia, because if you've seen the movie, that is all it is all about. Very few jump scares in that movie. I think there's like one, maybe, if you count the blood test scene. But other than that, it's all very slow burn, or just really cool special effects. So, what would the Thing... So, in the movie, the Thing can shapeshift and disguise itself as a regular person. And, as the movie progresses, the cast get more and more paranoid of each other, as they cannot tell who is really themselves or the Thing, because it can also assimilate memories. So it's able to perfectly replicate like human speech and stuff, and the only way to figure out who the Thing is it either revealing itself or you forcing it to reveal itself through like a blood test. So how do we capture this feeling in Dead by Daylight? Well, here's the idea I've come up with. It would have 3 abilities, 2 of them passive, 1 of them active. Now, I know that's a lot for a killer. Most killers normally only have 1 active, or 1 active and 1 passive. But I think if we want to capture this feeling in Dead by Daylight, these 3 things are going to be necessary. Yeah, this is going to make it more complicated than normal, but it will help bring the feeling of paranoia of the Thing from the movie into Dead by Daylight. Because the problem with Dead by Daylight is when you're playing a competitive online game, even if it is a quote-unquote horror game, over time, that feeling of horror, it's just going to fade. That's just going to happen when you play a game for 500 hours. That's not Dead by Daylight's fault. That's just how it is. That's human nature. So, I have come up with, hopefully, an idea to capture the feeling of paranoia in every single match against the Thing. And so, the Thing would have 3 abilities. Its main ability would be the shapeshift. This would be its active ability. And then it would have the passive ability of can't trust anyone, and the secondary passive ability of monophobia, or fear of being alone. That's what that means. So, what would these 3 things do? Well, to get started, we gotta talk about its first basic stats. So, it would have a terror radius of 32 meters, it would probably be medium height, and would move at a standard 115% movement speed. I've got a couple of pictures up of what I think the Thing could look like in Dead by Daylight. It would probably have the Palmer thing for the head, and Benning's Thing's hand for its weapon. That would be what you see as the killer. I'm not sure what its body would be. That's not a big deal, because it's the Thing. It can look like whatever it wants, so behavior can go nuts. But by keeping these 2 aspects, it is a homage to the movies, or the movie, rather. We're not talking about the other movies. And you can keep it fairly humanoid, which I know behavior likes to do. So, before we get started on its main ability, we gotta talk about its passive, which is can't trust anyone, which is named after Kurt Russell's line in the movie where he's talking into his little recording device thing while drinking J&B, and he says, "Nobody trusts anyone now, and we're all very tired." So, what is the main problem with a shape-shifting killer in Dead by Daylight? Swift. They can just communicate to each other, "Hey, are you the David running up to me?" And they'll be like, "No." And then they'll be like, "Okay, that's the Thing." And then they'll just run away and you'll be hard countered. So how do you fight against this ability? Well, there's no way to do it perfectly. That's just something we gotta talk about. Swift is still gonna be a pretty good counter to this killer, just like every other killer, but especially stealth killers. Because when you're playing solo, right, and you're playing against a wraith, unless you see the person being actively chased, you never know if the wraith is going to come around the corner and hit you. So, that sense of paranoia, it just doesn't translate to Swift, because even with this passive, they'll still be able to be like, "Hey, the Thing is chasing me." So don't worry about it jumping on you again, and they'll be like, okay. But hopefully this ability will help. So, what does Can't Trust Anyone do? It is a passive ability that, from a survivor's point of view, all other survivor models are randomly chosen. And, as the thing, every time you activate Shapeshift, these models are re-rolled. What does this... Okay, that's kind of a strange thing. What does this mean? So, this will help keep survivors guessing on who is who. They won't be able to trust anyone because they won't know who anyone is. Alright, so here's an example. Let's say you're playing as Meg Thomas. I got a picture of Meg Thomas right there. And in the lobby, you see that your 3 teammates are Jeff, Dwight, and Adam. When you're playing against the thing, instead of seeing Jeff, you would see, like, Young Jin, for example. Or instead of seeing Dwight, you would see Nancy. Or instead of seeing Adam, you would see Ace. And this goes for every single survivor, right? So from Jeff's point of view, Dwight wouldn't be Nancy. Dwight might be, like, Ash. And from Adam's point of view, Dwight would be, I don't know, like Jeff, you know? So every survivor sees every other survivor as a different model. Probably just the default outfits, too, to help keep things from being too complicated. And every time you activate Shapeshift, this ability rerolls. So when Meg looks at Jeff, she no longer sees Young Jin. She might see, like, Steve, right? So you would never know who anyone is, because you'd be like, oh, okay, now I used to know that Ace was safe, but now the killer's activated Shapeshift, and I don't know who anyone is anymore. So it would constantly keep you on your toes, trying to guess who is who and what is where. So hopefully this would help trip up Swifts. It would definitely make Solo Survivor a very paranoid experience, because you would never be able to trust anyone you see. I'm not entirely sure how the HUD would work with this. Perhaps they could just go back to the old HUD where it was stick figures when you're going against the thing instead of having their faces. That's something that is a bit of a problem. That's something maybe you could discuss in the comments, how they could solve that. Or maybe it would just be a question mark. That would be kind of cool. We can see that someone's injured, but you don't know who or where. That would be pretty cool. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about the killer's active ability, which is Shapeshift. If you ever watch The Thing, you know that the thing can make itself look like anyone, anytime, and perfectly disguise themselves. So, how would the thing do this in Dead by Daylight? When you press the activate ability button, you would Shapeshift, which would do several things. First, a cloud of black smoke would cover you, the thing, and obscure you for several seconds. This is so behavior doesn't have to animate you actually shapeshifting, because I could see that being a pain. And so during this transitionary period, several things will happen. The killer will enter third-person point of view. The killer will become undetectable. This is just to stop survivors from calling you out with, you know, like kindred or whatever constantly. The killer now moves at 100% movement speed, same as the survivor. The killer will take on the form of a random survivor, so like Jeff or, you know, Adam or Young Jin or whatever. And Can't Trust Anyone's secondary ability will activate. If you remember, that's the one where every time you activate Shapeshift, the models are re-rolled. So survivors are constantly changing, and since their models are randomly chosen and your model is randomly chosen, it'll be really hard. You won't be able to keep track of who is safe. So now you're in human form. What can you do? While you're in survivor form or human form, you're disguised as a survivor. For all intents and purposes, you basically move as a survivor. You're a third-person point of view. You're moving at 100% movement speed. No layman would be able to tell you apart from the regular survivors. So while you're disguised as a survivor, you would be able to pretend work on generators. But while you're doing this, you don't actually work on the generators. You're just pretending to work on it. You know, you'd be pulling the levers, you'd be sticking your hands in the wires, all that garbage. But the progress would not actually progress. Or you can just run around, you know, like a lost Dwight, and hopefully run into other people. So, if a survivor gets too close to the killer while the killer is in survivor form, I don't know how close, probably just a couple of meters, the killer would be able to lunge at them and injure them. They would probably grow the hand that I was talking about, so you'd see like Ace lunge at you with, here, You would see Ace lunge at you with that hand right there. That would probably be pretty terrifying. It would injure the survivor, which will do two things. The killer will be forced to change back into their true form, the killer form, which will take about a second or two, and the survivor will suffer the hindered status effect for a short period of time. This is to prevent them from making too much distance while the killer is transforming, because they'll be stuck in this transformation sequence. Maybe the killer would be able to move a little bit while this is happening. I don't know. That's, semantics. That's up for the behavior to decide. And then the chase is on. So this would be a good way to, cause a lot of paranoia, because every time you see a survivor approaching a generator, you'd be like, is that the killer? Is that another survivor? I don't know. Or you're like wandering through the map and you see a Meg on the other side of the wall, and you're like, oh, it's a friend, and then they lunge at you and you're injured and it's coming at you. That'd be pretty spooky, I think. But obviously there's a problem here. This killer, as I've described him so far, is super weak. You can be hard countered just by splitting up, and every time a survivor sees another survivor, they just run away, and you'd never be able to surprise anyone, which would suck really hard. You'd probably be the weakest killer in the entire game. So that's why I've come up with this second passive ability, Monophobia. In the movie, Kurt Russell and all the other fine actors who are playing people, that's how movies work, they have to stick together, because if they split up, that's the thing can just jump them while they're alone. So even though they don't trust each other, they still have to stick together as a group. And that's where Monophobia comes in Dead by Daylight, to help get that idea of you can't be with people, but you can't be alone either. So the way it works is when a survivor is working on a generator by themselves, they suffer a 20% repair speed penalty. Now, I don't like base just flat number debuffs as a power. I think it's boring as hell. I hated Forever Freddy. I thought it was probably the worst designed killer in the game. Way back, original Freddy, that could have been interesting, right? Back when he pulled you into the dream world and you had to wake up because you suffered like a 50% repair penalty. That was interesting because it had ways to counter it, but Forever Freddy, that sucked. I hated Forever Freddy, so I wouldn't normally do this, but this is the only way I can think of to force survivors to group up. Unless you want to run, full corrupt intervention and deadlock and all gen blocking perks. So if you can think of a better way to force survivors to work on generators together, instead of just separating out, feel free to tell me in the comments. Maybe you can come up with something more creative. I feel like this is pretty good though. So a survivor now has a choice when they're working on a generator by themselves. They can either just sit there and tank the repair penalty, which would suck pretty hard, or they can go out and try to find another survivor to work on a gen with, in which case they won't suffer the repair penalty anymore. But now they, they're dealing with the paranoia. Oh, is this person it's like Meg walks into the building and she sees Dwight working on the generator, and now she's like, okay, I could go work with Dwight on this, or and risk him being the thing. What if he's the thing? That could be really dangerous. Or she could be like, I'm not taking this risk. I'm going to go work on a generator by myself. I'm just going to deal with the 20% repair penalty. And I think it would be some interesting scenarios in which the survivors have to make a hard choice because they can't trust each other. So that's my ability to that's my idea to force survivors to group up. If you can think of something better, please tell me in the comments, because, yeah. So, in conclusion, this killer would be very heavily focused on paranoia and stealth, just like in the movies, which would cause the survivors to group up, but they would be unable to trust themselves. This is obviously very reminiscent of the movie. Go watch the movie if you haven't, it's great. And I'm sure you've had this thought to yourself, if you have seen the movie, you're like, Mice Man, this does not in any way incorporate the thing's ability to assimilate other creatures into its own, body or physiology. And I was like, and I had that thought, and I was like, yeah, it would be really cool if I was able to make it so the thing could like infect survivors and influence them somehow. but the only way I could see that having any real impact would be to like mess with the survivor controls or make them see different things. Maybe that could work. But the primary thing you'd think of is it like reverse survivor controls or make them move slower or something like that. And it would be like, I hate stuff like that. I hate things that take away your character's control, especially in multiplayer online games. Like Mei is my most hated hero in Overwatch because her entire ability revolves around removing your ability to do stuff. I hate crowd control stuff, so I just left that out of the power. If you can think of some way of incorporating that into his power, maybe to replace this passive, that would be pretty cool. Again, leave it in the comments. But yeah, I love The Thing. I love John Carpenter's The Thing. And so I was like, and because Dead by Daylight so heavily focuses on like classic horror movies like Michael Myers and Freddy Krueger and stuff, I figured The Thing could be a really good incorporation into the Dead by Daylight world. And here's my idea on how to do it. Is it perfect? No. As with all stealth killers, he suffers, The Thing suffers because you have no, movement options. You have only the monophobia for slowdown, which isn't a bad slowdown, but still. But I think, and while he probably would not be the strongest killer, but he would be very thematically appropriate, which I think is something Behavior likes to do a lot, focus more on the thematic appropriateness of something rather than its actual gameplay abilities, as anyone who has played on the Raccoon City Police Department map would tell you. So I'm really proud of this concept I've come up with. I think it's really good. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And thank you for listening to me rant about The Thing in Dead by Daylight for several minutes. I appreciate it. I think it's really good. Have a good day. Okay. Tell me in the comments what you like and dislike about my video. All right. Have a good day now. Bye-bye.